Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, Ceri, it was fun. It was good. We definitely didn't go to a nightclub, so that's all right. There is a QR code here. There's a request for feedback that I'm being encouraged to ask you for. Feedback is useful. This is a talk that I usually deliver to my teams or people that I work with. I've used it to train Scrum Masters and delivery type people. I'm giving it to you today as a talk. So, any bits that you feel don't land as well, feel free to give me some feedback and then I can improve it for other folks. They'll appreciate it too. Okie dokie. So, I think it was about June sometime, and the guy who was effectively in charge of everything was walking down a corridor in our offices, and he saw this board on the wall. And he stopped and had a little look, and it was filled with some lovely, positive, affirmative things on Post-it notes, things that it said that we should keep doing, some things that it said that we should do more of, and then as well as, there were some other sticky notes in the kudos section, but what there was this beautiful one-page A4, effectively a love letter from one of the Scrum Masters to his team, telling them how much he appreciated them. And it was just the most beautiful thing that I've seen. He kept walking down the corridor with this lovely, warm, fuzzy feeling in his chest. And then he came across the next board. This one didn't leave him with quite as fuzzy a feeling. It was filled with comments like, we can't make any progress because no one will let us, or there's not enough training budget for us to get upskill in the places that we need to, or no one listens to us, or every suggestion that we do make falls on deaf ears or is career limiting. So slightly less fuzzy feeling. But it did catch his attention, and he did come to our team and ask where it had come from. And this board was then the catalyst for a large cultural shift, I would say, across the whole organization. So it's quite a hierarchical organization. We couldn't really do anything about that. But what there also was quite a lot of defensive behavior, people not talking about the things that needed to be talked about, quite a lot of silos. People wouldn't share information, not because they couldn't, but because they felt like other people would try and take their jobs or stab them in the back if they did. So really quite a defensive culture. Feedback was not a thing, just not at all. And so we actually used this conversation, this was the trigger then, for a complete shift in that narrative, to the point where some 9 months later, that same senior leader was actually on stage and in response to a question, it sounds really trivial, but I can't express to you the difference that this was. In response to a question, he said, do you know, actually, I don't know. Which most senior leaders are not willing to do that, right? So it catalyzed a really powerful shift in the culture, in the way that the senior leadership team were behaving, and then the ways that everybody else felt able to act as a result. So I'm going to talk you through today this tool that we use to trigger this change, and I'm going to talk to you about the ways that we've used it to trigger similar sorts of changes within teams, how I've used it to help resolve conflict, the ways that it's more useful for just everyday things. You can use it for planning, but I'm going to talk you through what we've done there. So this is the WorryWall. This is a different QR code. So there's a handout, and I think some of you have been passed. If you want a downloadable version of that handout, there's a PDF that you can get by going to this very simple web form over here. So if you lose the piece of paper, then you can just download it and send it off to other people. And the handout is basically my slides, but they are also instructions in how to. So, okie dokie. So, what is it? The WorryWall, it's a tool to get teams talking. It is a tool to help people have what I would say the conversations that they should be having but currently are not. You might have experienced this yourself if you've been in that situation where you've had the same retrospective for 3 or 4 times in a row. The same things are coming up. Nothing is really shifting, nothing is changing, nothing is proving. You can't quite work out why, but nothing is being addressed. The same issues are being mentioned again and again. They're coming up and going, yeah, it's still a problem, what can we do? This is maybe a different approach. And that's where it started. So I was working with a team about 12, 13 years ago, and I think it was retrospective number 5 or 6, and the same things were coming up. And I'd tried everything. Like, I'd given them the sailboat retro, I'd given them the rose and thorns, I'd gone to stop, start, continue. Like, I'd done everything, and it wasn't working. So I tried this instead. I was watching a Tim Ferriss talk, and he was talking about failure and how to approach failure. And I like Tim Ferriss's stuff. He's a Stoic, and if anybody was in my talk yesterday, I'm a fan of AI-generated Stoicism. So I took what he did. I liked the thing that he was writing, but I thought, well, I can make it slightly better for the purposes of helping my team, actually, and I ran it as a retrospective. So I'm going to talk you through the steps that we took, literally a how to do it, which is on your handout in front of you, and then I'll talk about some of the other ways that we've applied it. This is a bit different to some of the other talks that I've given. This is a very practical one. But yeah, let's go. So the very first thing that we did as a team was I gave them a stack of Post-it notes, and I said, write down everything that is worrying you at the moment. Every single thing, no matter how big or how small. It can be really trivial, really stupid, or it can be really big and really significant. 1 item per Post-it note. And so I gave them about 5 minutes to do that. And I said to them, and I think it's really important when you ask people to do this, you don't have to share anything that you write down if you don't want to. But if you write down lots of things, you don't have to share everything either. It's up to you what you do with the things that you've written, where we go next. So write down everything that's worrying you, one thing at a time. When they've done that, I then asked them to, well, I didn't at first, I did later when we realized that metrics were important, but so I asked them to, we'll just pretend for the sake of this, ask them to give it a rating from 0 to 5. So if 0 is, it's not really a problem, like it's concerning me, but it's not really impacting my day-to-day operations, it's fine. All the way up to 5, because of this thing, I feel like everything is on fire and I'm already looking for a new job. So some things absolutely did get rated a 5. So the next thing is I'm one person. I asked them to put everything up on a wall. So all of the things that they'd written that they were comfortable to share all went up along one wall. I asked them to group similar things together and then to have a look and notice what other people had written. So what I want to, I suppose, impress on you is the process that I put people through to get to the end result is very intentional and very purposeful. With the individual, you're not having to share your worries with anyone else, so it can be quite cathartic to actually get everything out. A lot of people said that they didn't realize all of the things that they'd been worrying about, all of the things that they'd been carrying. But what was really powerful was when they put everything along the wall and they saw the things that other people were worrying about. The first comment, or one of the first 3 comments that comes out every single time that I've run this without fail is, oh, everybody else is worrying about the same things. I thought it was just me. And what's really lovely about this is that it takes away some of the shame that comes with the things that we think that we shouldn't be worrying about. The trouble with that shame is that it stops us from addressing those things. It stops us from telling anybody about them. It stops us maybe even from acknowledging them to ourselves. I shouldn't be worrying about this. I should be more capable or professional. Everybody else has their shit together. It's just me that doesn't understand or doesn't know this thing. So having everything along the wall, seeing that other people had put up similar things was quite powerful. What else is powerful about this particular exercise is it's kind of anonymous. So you might be sticking up, obviously you are sticking up the thing that you've written. But the thing that I say to people is, don't worry about people noticing what you've written. Everybody else is just worrying about their own things too, right? They're not paying attention to what you're putting up there. So you can let go of your concern there. I think once in 13 years of running this, once somebody has said, that's an interesting thing to write, and it's because they'd written something like triggledy-bibble or some really random word, and they were like, what the heck? So that's the only time in 13 years that that's ever been called out. So it's safe, it's anonymous, and now suddenly we realize that we're part of a collective rather than an isolated idiot in a team of capable peers. It's quite powerful. Okay, so here's where Tim Ferriss comes in. God love you, Tim. Thank you for this. So I asked them then, I've got a second wall prepared, I asked them then to take their stickies down again and to move them into one of these three columns. The three columns are I or we can change this. I or we can change this, but we're going to need some support or some help. And then the third one is I or we can't. So in the when they've put these all up, I asked them to look at the I or we can't first. Because if you think about all of the things that you're already worrying about, there are almost certainly some things that are weighing heavily on your soul that actually there's nothing you can do about them. Now, that doesn't stop them gnawing away at you. It doesn't stop them from infiltrating your thoughts when you're trying to do some deep, focused work. But they're still there. The realization that there's nothing you can do about them, and again, the comment that comes each time that we run this is, I ask people what they want to do with this I can't column. And they say, well, we're just going to let this go. Like, I've been complaining about this for months, but actually that realization that there's nothing we can do about that particular one. Okay, I'm going to stop letting this keep a hold of me in the way that it has and let it go. What's also interesting is when you contrast the things that people put in the we can't do anything about this column with the things that they've put in the other columns. Now, as from the first exercise, lots of people have written the same things. Now, what's fascinating is when people put the same word in I can with help, and I can't. It's a great discussion. It starts to bring home the realization that when I say this one word, actually, maybe I mean a different thing to the thing that you meant. It's not a conversation that we often have as a team. We don't even realize that we need to have that conversation because we don't realize that that word that's in the back of our heads that we're talking about in day-to-day conversation, we should communicate more, that doesn't mean the same thing to me as it means to you. So when you identify that there's nothing that you can do about communication, it opens up this brilliant conversation about what communication actually means. So, we then move into the I can column. Now, this is where we actually start looking at the things that we can address, the real progress that we can make. And I like to, I like to ask people to put this column into an order. So I've got two different ways of doing this. When we are face-to-face, I ask them to put the things that they feel most able to address, most able to deal with at the bottom or an eyesight. And the things that feel less achievable for whatever reason, put them higher up. So the idea here is that the things that are right in front of us are literally right in front of us, and the things that are metaphorically out of reach or systemically out of reach are literally out of reach. What we're trying to do here is get people to focus only on the next available thing, not to be distracted with what's not relevant at this particular point in time. If you're doing it online, it's slightly different. I would go the other way around, because the natural order of things when you see things written down is to go from top to bottom for most people in Western cultures. So we start top to bottom, left to right. It's quite linear and obvious when we're working in this online space. So what's next is asking people to actually decide what they want to address and how they want to do that. And this is always a lovely conversation because, of course, again, there's that idea of I've written this word, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same word to me as it does to you. So this is where we can start breaking that down into what does that mean? What does that look like? What's stopping us? What's the blocker? Once we've gone through that, there's still that middle column that we haven't addressed yet. The most powerful place that I've seen that middle column used was in, so it's in an energy company, and it was, I would say, a psychologically unsafe environment. So in this organization, you couldn't be seen to not know. You couldn't be seen to not have the answers. You couldn't be seen to be needing any kind of upskilling. And so this middle column was a fabulous opportunity for people to express some of those needs anonymously and in a way that then was able to generate some help. So what I asked people to do was to put their cards in the middle column anonymously still. But if they saw something else that they felt that they were able to offer support with or able to offer help with, and again, we put this on a physical wall in a big open shared space so that other teams would be able to see it as well. And we put at the top an invitation and ask, if you can help with this, please put your name next to the sticky or on the sticky note. The reason that this worked so well in that particular space was where it wasn't safe for me to ask for help. If somebody put their name on that sticky saying that they could give some help, it left me able to come and approach that person without the shame of having everyone else seeing me going and asking for that help, and going and getting that help anonymously, quietly in the back corner, and nobody else need know. And of course, depending on who put their name on that sticky, it's up to the person who wrote it to decide whether they want to go and have that conversation. It wasn't forced on anybody. There's an open invitation, followed by a reciprocal offer of support, followed by a choice. Again, we're keeping this idea of real psychological safety. There's no threat, there's no shame, there's no humiliation, there's no blame at any point in this process. And I think that's what makes it work. It's why people are willing to actually be more open. And what's really fabulous is that once people started to go through this process and see what other people had put up, they would go back and write more things on their sticky, like, okay, I wasn't going to put this up, I'll actually share this. Or stickies that they'd written and decided not to put up, they went back, picked up those stickies, and felt more able to put those stickies up. And it started to open up the conversation in these very threatened, psychologically unsafe, perhaps, teams, but certainly teams that weren't talking openly about these things with each other. So I've got some real life examples. So this is from a series of workshops that I ran fairly recently. So this is groups of up to 15 people at a time. We ran 9 of these workshops, and this was in a large European organization looking to instigate some cultural transformation. So there's quite a lot of stress, of burnout in this space. And so, I mean, there were many more than just these 3 groups, but these are 3 key groups. So you can see the sorts of things that people are starting to put up and starting to be willing to talk about that perhaps in their teams or across teams or certainly with their senior leadership, they're not currently able or willing to talk about. And you'll see that they've put some numbers on them. And then what we've done at the top there is I asked them to categorize them, so to put them roughly together and to give each group a title, and then to work out how many how bad is this problem? And the reason we do the collective number is because it gives us an idea of the scope and scale of how much and how broadly this is impacting us. What we've then done is collated that from across the different groups that put this together, and we've built a map of how much and where we have significant issues. And what's always interesting to me is it's the same things that come up again and again and again. So there's almost always something to do with communication. There's almost always something to do with culture. There's almost always something to do. They've put org issues that usually comes under things like governance or the system. And what's fascinating to me is that when I was working as an Agile coach, when I was working as a Scrum Master, all of the conversations that we were having in the retros were about process. None of the conversations that we were having were about our person-to-person, human-to-human conversation. None of them were about how we felt towards each other. None of them were about how we felt about ourselves. But what this did in those spaces was actually begin to open up those conversations. Okay, so we've done it. This is an example of doing it with an online team. I don't know how clearly that's coming out. What you'll see here is that we've actually done sticky dots instead. This team asked, so in terms of the ratings, I give people the option on how they rate it in that can column. There's multiple options for how to actually rate it. So you can rate things by how miserable this is making me. So either it's not making me very miserable all the way up to, no, this is breaking my heart on a daily basis. Or you can talk about things like business impact. So how much is this hurting the business? This being an issue, us not communicating or us not giving feedback openly. Either this is not having very much impact on the business, or it's having a significant amount of impact on the business. You can talk about how much financial impact it's having. So how much is this problem? How much money is that losing us? Or you can talk about how much is this stopping us from getting what we need from each other. So again, different ratings. So this particular team decided to rate things in terms of business impact and ease to address. So how complex is this to actually do something about? How difficult is this to do something about? And so we gave it, so the green rating, the green dot, that says that this is the better end of the scale. So this is something that either we think is something relatively easy to do something about, or we think that this is something that will have a significant business impact. Like sorting this out will really make a difference around here. And then we had green, and then blue, and then amber, and then red. They decided to introduce a fourth one because they couldn't decide. There were so many things in the middle, so they split that out as well. So everything in the red end is things that are relatively quite difficult to do something about. So there's larger, more systemic issues. So we went back later and actually broke those down into smaller parts. So how can we make that into something smaller that we can address? And things that would have relatively low business impact. So right at the bottom, I haven't actually included that. Anyway, right at the bottom, there were things with 2 red stickies. So those are the 2 red dots, sorry. So those were the things that we decided either not to address, or depending on where that red dot fell, maybe that's something that we can break down. Okay, so after this, then there's some next steps. So, of course, you want to take your lowest hanging fruit, whatever that looks like for you. You want to take the things that you can address the most easily, or that you feel most passionately about, or that are having the biggest business impact, and start to actually plan out what that's going to look like. So I recommend not picking too many things. 1 to 3 things works best. More than that tends to get overwhelming. You've still got your normal day-to-day work to get on with, and if you're a small team, then there's a limit to what you can do. With the international organization that I'm working with the 9 workshops, they've taken one thing for each of those groups, and then they've decided what they're going to do to address that. And then we need to agree how and where and when to follow up on our experiments. So when I've run this as a retrospective and with this group in Europe, we've actually agreed to come back and look at this again, because the conversation was quite helpful, quite useful, and because there's some real changes that people feel that they can make. They've then come back the next retrospective, and they actually asked if they could do the same thing again. So with this team that we came back and did the same thing again, we went through the same process again. So we wrote down everything that was worrying them again. they then mapped that against the things that had come up last time. So is this still an issue? And if it was still an issue, they would keep the sticky from the previous time, but put a little mark on there. So they could see over time how many marks. We used a tally chart. So you could see how this was building over time. So if you've got something that is having a business impact of 5, that is causing me to cry on a daily basis, and I can see that it's got a tally chart number of 5, that's something that we want then to be hyper aware of, and maybe senior leadership to be picking up on. And the lovely thing was that by having this visible in the middle of the office space, that is indeed what then happened. So the senior leadership team, the guy walking down the corridor, saw this coming up in this first week, and then saw it being added to progressively week after week. What was really fascinating is we started doing this for one team, but other people started adding their own as well. So everybody joined in. But what was great about this was then the senior leadership team started to get interested, because there were things that would go in the can column that they were, obviously quite upset about seeing that that's what people are worrying about. There were things in the can with help column that they were quite pleased to see that people were putting their names on to offer help and support in the wider organization. But it was the can't column that really bothered them, because there were things in there that they, as a senior leadership team, thought were really easy and simple to address. And they didn't realize that people were even worrying about this stuff. And so they then decided to take some initiative and address those things as a senior leadership team and do something about it just by virtue of us making this visible. Okay, so it wasn't just that team following up on their experiments. It was the senior leadership team and then eventually the whole organization. So when we come back to things as a team, we can start to see some of the progress that we're making. We have the option to move the things that we have addressed from that the worry wall, where we have the option to move them. I usually ask them to move them up to the top, so above the can with help and can't columns, so that we can see when things are addressed. We don't lose sight of the progress that we've made, and we can see the things that we were worrying about in the past. It's a useful metric to then have if that thing comes up again in the future. That's interesting if we find that we thought we'd address something and then it comes up again. Again, a really useful conversation. There's some guiding principles that I want to make sure that I give to you. So at no point is any of this forced on people. And this is one of the things that makes the tool, in my opinion, so powerful. Every single step is an invitation. If I feel like I have autonomy, I'm able to be more open, more honest, and to be less threatened when I'm then having the conversation about where does this come from, what do we want to do about it. Because I don't feel like I'm being controlled, I have agency over the process, it makes me more willing to engage with the process. Every step is anonymous. And at no point do I call out, and I ask them not to call out themselves, who owns a particular sticky, so who wrote this one. All we do is we notice what's interesting. And I think, again, the power of that is that if I'm the only person that wrote that one thing, it's up to me whether I open up about having written that. But also when we're putting things in the order of what's important to address. If my thing is down at the bottom and somebody else's as well, again, I've got that solidarity, and then I can open up about the fact that I've owned it. But it's not forced upon me. So I can see that I've got someone else, but at no point am I blamed or shamed or humiliated for having that particular problem. And that's a really important point when I'm asking them to write down their worries. Depending on the context, I'll ask them not to write anything that blames or points a finger at a specific person. If they want to identify that there's a problem with a person or a particular team, I ask them to use language that maybe isn't blaming or shaming. So maybe instead of that person's an asshole, maybe saying that we have difficulties with communication, or we don't see eye to eye, or there's as connection issues. So try and frame it in a way, because for a lot of the teams that I've run this with, this board is going to be visible, it's going to be on the wall. Not only do we want to be blaming or shaming or humiliating or making feel unsafe anybody that's in the room, we also don't want to have that, cast that stone into the pond and have that ripple outwards either. So not attacking anyone as part of what we write in those worries is really important. And what's great about that approach as well is that when somebody does see their team or their name up there, there's not an attack, there's just a recognition of an issue or a challenge, and most likely they're feeling it too. Now, if they're feeling it too and there's an attack, they're not going to get on board. They're going to go, well, clearly it's all because of you. Like, look at how you write a Post-it note. Whereas if we're saying there's a challenge and an issue here, it starts to open up a conversation about, well, actually, we're feeling that too, and maybe I'd like to address this with you. How can we? What are we going to do about it? Rather than, well, you shouldn't be, and flinging insults. You also choose where to put your own stickies. The only time that doesn't apply is when we're grouping things. So you choose where you put your sticky initially. You choose which column you put it in. So it's up to you whether you feel that you can or can't or need some help to address something. Nobody else can dictate, because it's your worry, your words. The concept is whatever is in your head. Just because you and I are using the same words, that doesn't mean that you know where my sticky should go. We don't do that in the grouping session. In fact, I actively invite people to move the stickies around, and I ask them to do this in silence as well. So move the stickies so that they're grouped. If you disagree with where someone has moved your sticky, then has moved a sticky, then you can move it to where you feel it would be better suited. If whoever put it in the original place disagrees, then I don't know, you can just fight it out. It's fine. Nobody has ever fought it out, and it's been fine. They've just sort of come to some agreement, and actually, usually it means that two groups that were disparate are now put together. So now we can see that actually this is a bigger problem. Okay, so I'm going to leave the rest of the time for anybody that has any questions that would like to ask anything about this. Oh, yes, okay. We'll start with you and then come to you and then the other two after.
Fantastic. And if I'm right, if you are thinking someone on my team's an arsehole, then you facilitate these kind of discussions as a neutral body, is that correct?
Sorry, say that again?
You can act as that neutral facilitator, is that
yes.
right?
Yeah. So it's not for me to participate in this. I'm an external facilitator, for that conversation.
Hi there, great tool. Just curious of how you can use the virtual whiteboard type of system, and how do you make it more visible to the senior management side?
That's a really great question. Okay, so we used it as our backdrops. So we took a snapshot of the board that each of us individually felt the most strongly about. And because it's a section of the board, there's no one card saying, this is my thing that I wrote. There's just a collection of issues. So we took photographs, both of when things were spread along the wall so that we could see the groupings back here. So some people chose that group of things as their backdrop, and then other people chose when we put things in the can, can't, and with help, and they put those as their backdrop. So then it's visible and present on every single call that they're going on, and it created quite a lot of intrigue and curiosity, like, what is this thing behind you? Why does it say that there's friction with that team over there? What's that about? So it actually invited some really great conversations, and then other teams in that organization started then doing the same thing. Ran their own process and put it up on their backdrops as well. And eventually then the senior leadership team did their own version and put it up on their backdrops, which was actually a fabulous conversation opener, because now you can see the things that the senior leadership team are worrying about when you're on a call with them. They didn't do it every time. It was only internally, I should be clear. It wasn't with like, hey, customer, here's all the things that are going wrong inside our organization, buy our stuff. But yeah, so internally we would have it as our backdrop. well. But yeah, it was, again, really lovely. It helped people see the human side of the other teams, of each other. So, yeah. Yeah.
Hello. I love it. I think it's great. I'm definitely going to have a go. What went through my mind was whether you've ever experimented with, alongside something like this, doing the reverse. So basically, what are all these are things that put the brakes on. What are the things that put the foot on the accelerator? Which are the ones that have the most impact? So which are the things we want to double down on? And again, like, which of those can we control? Which of those can we control with a bit of help? And which do we need somebody else to work on?
So I'm not entirely sure what you're asking.
I'm asking if you've ever tried it with, instead of the issues and the blockers, whether you've tried it with the things that work well for the team, the accelerators.
Okay, yeah. So what I haven't spoken about is the keep doing and the continue.
Yeah, exactly,
that I mentioned at the start. So yes, we absolutely did do that. So when I did that particular double whammy, so we did that. I've done the two different boards in both of those, what I would say, psychologically unsafe teams, because it's really important for the reason we did the kudos board first was so that the leadership team were bought into the idea before they then saw everything that was going wrong. Okay. That helps. But yeah, absolutely. So at each retrospective, we began with the worries, and then we would absolutely address what to keep doing and what to do more of. So yeah, what's going well. I do think that is important to address as well. If we focus only on what's going wrong, then it can shape our perspective of how our organization is operating. And we always ended our sessions with the kudos. So yes, absolutely. We went through the same process with the what's going well and what to keep doing. So write down everything that you're worrying about, and then the second part of it was write down everything that you feel really good about, and then put it in either that's something you want to keep doing, or something that's what we want to do more of, or something that maybe is kudos for other people.
Thank you
for highlighting that one.
Hi, I appreciate that every team's different and they'll all have their own different worries, but what's your kind of sweet spot for how frequently you would run an exercise like this?
How freely?
Frequently.
So we've run it as a part of the retrospectives every 2 to 3 weeks is fine. With leadership teams, every month is fine. And somewhere in between, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks works really well. I find more frequently than that, you're sort of getting in the way of actually conversations about doing the work, and less frequently, you're not actually making any traction with dealing with these things that are hurting people in their hearts.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
How do you deal with people that are, I guess, a little bit kind of introvert and don't want to participate? How do you kind of facilitate that?
Brilliant. So the whole way through, this space is safe for those people. In each of the stages, there's no demand that anyone step forwards, come to the front of the room, or speak up. All you have to do is move stickies. And if what you want to do is internally process and then have a conversation about that later, I think that's part of what that middle column was so valuable for. The people that you can still express an opinion. So even the introverts I've found still have an opinion on where exactly in that column their sticky should go. But because you're moving your own sticky, there's no need to discuss or justify that to anybody. There's no demand for you to be vocal about that. You're just putting it where you feel it goes. And then the rest of the conversation about what to address, like it's right there. Like if yours is at the bottom with the things that have the most impact and are easiest to address, you don't have to identify that you wrote that and stuck that there. That's then a group conversation about well, how are we going to address this? What are we going to do? So again, there's no demand for you to put yourself outside of your comfort zone. But if there's something that you feel that you need to contribute to shape the direction of where that initiative or that experiment goes, you can speak up. But you've got quite a lot of time to be able to process that as part of this process. So you can think about what you want to say and prepare it before you actually do it.
So the key is letting them know that they're in a safe space.
Absolutely,
Okay. All right,
absolutely. At every single stage. But I think it's apparent because I'm not demanding, I don't ever point a finger and say who wants to talk about this or who wants to address this or whose sticky is this. So people always at every single point have the option.
So sort of a question of practicalities. How do you preserve anonymity in a physical space where you could sort of maybe see people putting notes on the board and might have different colour post-its or identifiable handwriting?
Yeah. So usually we do it in a room to begin with. We don't do the whole exercise in a shared space. We do it in a room. So I use like sticky, what are they called? Whiteboard sheets, sticky whiteboard sheets. And so for the can with help and can't columns, those go on a separate sticky whiteboard sheet, so we can then move those to then the public space. So nobody actually sees who wrote it. We also don't put our names on the board, so nobody knows which, well, they can usually guess, but nobody knows exactly which team's board this is. But also, in terms of the anonymity, I think as soon as the board goes up, it kind of stops being a problem. First of all, the team feels bolder about the things that they've put up because they've got that support of knowing that other people in their team have the same concerns. If they're not happy about any of their stickies being visible, it's a sticky note. There's nothing permanent there. They can just take it off so that it's no longer visible. But also, once it goes up in that public space, like I say with the teams that then everybody else joined in with the same exercise, it kind of stops it becoming about that team, and it kind of highlights the wider organizational issues. It's not just, it's never just that team that has those problems. I mean, there's always something that specifically that team has, and that's fine, but it's never, like in terms of the communication or the governance or the cultural issues or workload or budget, that's never just that team. And so it could be any team. And so other teams are like, oh, great, I'm glad that we're finally making this conversation open. So it sort of stops it being a threat in that way.
Any more questions from behind?
Come here.
That was wonderful, thank you. Great companion piece to yesterday's Stoicism talk. When you are ranking things low-hanging fruit to high-hanging fruit, and you're doing sessions with a regular cadence, like you said, do you find there's a tendency for low-hanging fruit to be filled in with more low-hanging fruit? How quickly do you kind of get to the tough stuff at the top of the tree?
I'll be completely honest, rarely, if ever. What almost always happens is what we think is low-hanging fruit turns out to be a really big, significant amount of work to resolve. What you also tend to find, though, is that a lot of the things that we do to address the things in that low-hanging fruit space actually make a lot of the other worries less of a worry. It either makes them less significant, so you might give it a lower rating, or it kind of resolves it as part of doing that work, or it shows that it's irrelevant. And a lot of the time, the team takes the stuff at the top and they go, do you know what, I think this actually needs to go in the can't camp. I think we just need to let this go. And that's part of the value of going back over time and reviewing it again and again. So coming back to it in that regular cadence, you go, do you know what, actually, I don't even know why that's in the can. Yes, we can in theory, but in practicality, it's never going to happen. And actually, I'm not that worried about it anymore. I'd much rather focus on these things here. Turns out that's huge.
Brilliant, thank you.
Marvellous. I think that brings us to time, so let's give Ceri a big round of applause, everyone. Thank you, Ceri.